what are we waiting for? Lights, camera, Retro Man!
G'day viewers, Retro Man here and welcome to the 80s Show. Now today I will be taking a look at 10 things you didn't know about Two of a Kind, the 1983 romantic fantasy starring John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. Now let's kick things off with number 10, and let's start way back in 1978. John and Olivia were in that blockbuster musical Grease, and everybody wanted to see them in another movie. So for 5 long years there, they kind of toyed with the idea of whether or not they should star in Grease 2. But for some reason, they couldn't quite get the script right. I mean, at the end of Grease, John and Olivia have left high school, and Grease is essentially a high school musical. So really, where do you go with the script of Grease 2? So trying to nail down a great plot was problematic. So it went back and forth, guys, and in the end they decided to do Grease 2 with a much younger cast. But the plan was kind of to get John and Olivia back in there in a supporting role capacity. But for one reason or another, they couldn't make that work either. So John and Olivia wanted to do a romance film, and they were looking for their own project, and finally they stumbled upon Two of a Kind. And the funny thing is, while Two of a Kind was in the pre-production phase, Grease 2 was released and it flopped. So John and Olivia felt that they had a narrow escape, but could they make Two of a Kind work? Now let's move along now to number 9, and when the script reached John and Olivia, it was not called Two of a Kind, it was titled Second Chance, and there was a director on board called Richard Rush. Now, he didn't end up making the film, but he was penciled in there for a while in the pre-production phase, and Rush was responsible for directing The Stuntman with Peter O'Toole, which was a film that wasn't really well received on initial release, but ended up becoming a cult movie. Now, John and Olivia were kind of happy with the script because they wanted to do a romance that wasn't a period piece like Grease. They wanted to do something that was very evocative of the 80s, but at the same time very wholesome. And in some ways, they were very happy with the script because it had all those Frank Capra vibes. Frank Capra, of course, was that filmmaker who gave us It's a Wonderful Life, that Jimmy Stewart classic. So the Two of a Kind script had some of those touches to it, and they just felt that this was the right project for them. Now let's take a look at number 8. With director Richard Rush out of the picture, the scriptwriter John Herzfeld decided, well, maybe I could direct this thing myself. And John was a bit of a budding actor, and at the same time he directed a few after-school TV movies with Scott Baio. Some of those were received quite well, and John felt that he was up to the task of directing John and Olivia. And John Herzfeld was also a close personal friend of Sylvester Stallone. And guys, John had just previously worked with Sly on Staying Alive, so this was a very easy match, guys. So John decided to come on board and direct what he had just written. Now let's hop on to number 7, and Olivia Newton-John, guys, had starred in Grease and Xanadu, but really she wasn't a trained actress. So in preparation for Two of a Kind, she decided to take acting classes to really get in touch with the craft. And I think if you take a look at Two of a Kind, you will find that in terms of acting, Olivia really has improved a little. I think those acting classes paid off. So it was very interesting. She was already a movie star and one of the biggest stars in the world, but she just needed to touch up on a few little intricate things to make her performance in Two of a Kind even stronger. Moving right along, guys, to number 6, And the great composer Bill Conti was scheduled to do the film score for Two of a Kind, but he kind of left the project due to the insistence of director John Herzfeld, who kind of decided that he wanted to bring in composer Patrick Williams to do a film score based on the Olivia song Twist of Fate, which was done especially for the film. So if you listen to the soundtrack of the movie as it goes through, you will find that the score is very reminiscent of Twist of Fate, thanks to Patrick Williams. Let's take a look at number 5. And Two of a Kind was expected to film entirely in New York City, but due to inclement weather, they kind of moved a little bit away from New York and had to go out to Hollywood to the 20th Century Fox studios in Burbank. And in the end, the production ended up utilising some of those sets that were used for John Huston's 1982 musical production of Annie. Now let's take a look at number 4, guys, and this is a very interesting Olivia Newton-John story. Now, when the production was filming in New York, there was a lady and a German shepherd named Pasha that was kind of hanging around the set, and they asked this lady, would you like to be an extra in the film? And of course she said yes, and she was there in the background of a scene, but just before they started shooting, Olivia, being the animal lover that she is, decided to go over and pat the German shepherd. Now, just before she did that, the owner of the dog said to her that Pasha is scared of crowds. But Olivia felt, well, I'll just pat the dog on the head and it'll be all good. But as it turned out, guys, Pasha actually moved forward and bit Olivia's hand. So in the end, they had to remove the owner of the dog and Pasha from the set. And guys, they kept filming with Olivia. She was a true professional. She just got on and did the scene. And later on, they decided, well, we better check out this wound she has here and see if everything is okay. So the medics did that, and sure enough, Olivia suffered no injury and there was no after effects of the dog bite. So that was a fun little story. Moving right along now, guys, to number 3, and this one's all about producer Robert Stigwood. Now, Robert Stigwood was this Australian businessman who got involved in the film industry, and he actually produced that John Travolta blockbuster Saturday Night Fever. Now, at one point, Stigwood was attached to Two of a Kind, and guys, he stipulated 2 things when he was on board. He wanted the actor Donald Pleasance, who is quite famous for playing, you know, an array of eclectic roles. He wanted him cast as the fiendish Beasley, who would later be played by Oliver Reed in the finished film. And also Stigwood wanted to bring in the Bee Gees. He wanted those guys to do the soundtrack. But when Stigwood exited the production, along went Donald Pleasance and the Bee Gees. So guys, it took on a different form when Stigwood left. Now let's take a look at number 2, and this one is all about the Two of a Kind soundtrack. Now, I tell you what, guys, it's hard to believe, but this film almost did not come out with a movie soundtrack. I mean, Olivia had always recorded Twist of Fate for the film, but basically that's where it ended. But what happened was that Twist of Fate was released on the radio months before Two of a Kind was even finished, you know, the post-production phase, and Twist of Fate was really doing well. I mean, audiences fell in love with that pop confectionery, and guys, they kind of felt that maybe what we should do is take advantage of this situation and get Olivia to perform a few more songs and include them in the soundtrack. So what happened is they got Olivia back into the recording studio. She did a couple of other songs, including a very tender duet with John Travolta, and they inserted those in the film last minute. Also, they felt the soundtrack needed an injection of some other artists, and they threw Chicago on the soundtrack, and also the band Journey got involved. They were just about to release their album Frontiers, and they had this song called Ask the Lonely, and they actually dropped that song from their album and put it on the Two of a Kind soundtrack. So guys, we nearly didn't have a soundtrack for Two of a Kind, and in the end, the soundtrack was that big that it even outperformed the box office of the film. Here we go, guys, we've finally made it to number one, and let's just say that Two of a Kind was a film with two big stars, and it had its heart in the right place, but unfortunately it bombed at the box office, and the critics universally bagged it. But guys, there was one other thing that really affected the film, and the Golden Raspberry Awards came along, and they decided that they were going to award the film with 5 nominations, and Two of a Kind copped a nomination for Worst Film, Worst Actor, Worst Actress, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Director. Thankfully though, guys, it only received nominations. It didn't win any of those awards. So Two of a Kind escaped that. And man, I mean, some of you, of course, went to see the film. Some of you still have fond memories of it. And this is one of those films that, yeah, like I said, it didn't do so well at the box office. The critics were unkind, and Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta sadly didn't make any more movies together as a result of the film, which was kind of considered a bit of a fiasco. But guys, there are fans out there that still appreciate the film for what it is, which is a little bit of bubblegum fantasy romantic fluff. And I think, guys, the soundtrack of this one is what is really warmly remembered. And for my money, guys, I look at Two of a Kind as a really interesting pairing of two big stars, and it was great to see them in a contemporary 80s production. They look fantastic, and there's some comedy in this. The chemistry between the two of them, I think, works. The plot line is a bit hokey, the fantasy element, and that kind of brings it down a little bit. But overall, I like to think of Two of a Kind as a bit of an underrated film with two very likeable stars. So guys, that concludes my look at 10 things you didn't know about Two of a Kind. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you about this film. So anyway, tell me in the comments below, have you seen Two of a Kind? What do you think of the film? I personally saw it in the cinema back in '83, and I fondly remember it. So guys, I have a lot more coming your way. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you're enjoying the content, please subscribe because it really helps. And I will be back with some more episodes very soon. But until then, this is Retro Man, living the dream, 80s style. Stay gold.
Thanks for watching. Retro Man will return faster than a boomerang and with hair just as impressive as John Travolta. Please subscribe and good night, viewers.